Waist-to-hip ratio flags cardiovascular risks that BMI overlooks in large analysis. This is Planetterrian Daily, episode 149. Waist circumference and waist-to-hip ratio tracked atrial fibrillation, heart failure, and coronary heart disease more closely than body mass index. The measures captured elevated risk in people whose BMI appeared normal and lower risk in some higher BMI individuals. The analysis underscores that fat distribution, not just total mass, drives cardiometabolic outcomes. Published in JACC journals, the work examined how central adiposity correlates with specific cardiac endpoints across large cohorts. These ratios provide information that BMI alone does not supply for risk stratification. Now, here's something most people get wrong about body measurements. Most people assume a single weight to height calculation captures the health consequences of body fat. In reality, the location of that fat matters more than its total amount for several cardiovascular pathways. Right now, visceral adipose tissue surrounding abdominal organs releases inflammatory signals and alters lipid metabolism in ways subcutaneous fat does not. People with identical BMIs can therefore show markedly different rates of atrial fibrillation and heart failure depending on waist circumference. One memorable figure is that shifting from a low to a high waist-to-hip ratio roughly doubles the hazard ratio for coronary disease, even when BMI stays constant. The next time clothing size or a tape measure changes while the scale does not, that shift may reflect a redistribution carrying independent risk. Clinicians are therefore encouraged to record waist and hip values alongside BMI during routine checks, so that interventions can target fat distribution rather than weight alone. Waist-to-hip measurements add a low-cost layer of information that refines risk estimates without requiring advanced imaging. From how simple body measurements refine risk assessment, we turn to another measurement challenge, this time in wild populations facing environmental stress. Researchers applied genomic tools to wild populations and pinpointed groups with limited adaptive capacity before declines become irreversible. The approach supplies practical data for conservation planning under climate stress. It demonstrates how sequence information can guide targeted protection. The phys.org report emphasizes that genomics can rank vulnerability across habitats to inform preemptive action. Such data allow managers to focus resources on populations least likely to adapt on their own. Genomic profiling of wild fish populations now supplies concrete guidance on which groups face the steepest climate risk. By sequencing individuals across habitats, researchers can rank vulnerability before population crashes occur. The approach moves conservation from reactive rescue to proactive prioritization. It also raises the question of how quickly such data can be integrated into fisheries management plans. The method provides a template that other species facing rapid environmental change could follow. While genomics helps us read current biological risk, other researchers are using it to read the past. 3 UK trauma centers tracked cases from 2019 onward and recorded 59 deaths plus roughly 500 injuries among children whose average age was 12. Fewer than 2% of the injured children wore helmets. 1 in 6 required hospital admission. The report frames the pattern as an emerging public health issue tied to rising e-scooter use. The data come from the journal Emergency Medicine Journal and cover 3 centers reporting consistent trends in pediatric trauma presentations. From acute injury patterns in children, we move to how chronic environmental exposures affect adults with existing conditions. Heat, smoke, and other exposures intensify arthritis, lupus, and postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Existing research documents direct physiological effects rather than future projections. The commentary calls for clinical awareness of environmental triggers in routine care. Stat News coverage emphasizes that patients with these conditions experience measurable symptom increases during documented heat and smoke events. The piece urges clinicians to incorporate exposure history into standard assessments. Environmental context also shapes how we interpret historical evidence, as seen in changing views of Africa's past. Changing political contexts, technologies, and theoretical frameworks have repeatedly altered interpretations of African history. Each era brought new questions and methods that reframed earlier conclusions. The overview shows how scientific narratives evolve with broader society shifts. The phys.org article outlines successive periods in which colonial, post-colonial, and technological influences reshaped research priorities. This progression illustrates the interplay between evidence and external context in shaping historical understanding. Researchers examined constructed languages such as Elvish and Klingon alongside languages children invent spontaneously. The work explores whether universal patterns emerge even when rules are created deliberately rather than inherited. Findings may clarify which aspects of language structure are hardwired versus learned. The phys.org report highlights how artificial languages serve as natural experiments for testing grammatical processing. This approach complements studies of naturally evolved languages by isolating deliberate design choices. Historical records from the Roman period show bread was viewed as the most nourishing staple, while olive oil, vegetables, and fish played smaller roles. The contrast highlights how contemporary reconstructions emphasize ingredients that were once secondary. The study draws on texts from Emperor Julian's era to map dietary priorities. Phys.org coverage notes that Julian described bread as the food thought most nourishing among Romans. These texts provide direct evidence of staple rankings that differ from current Mediterranean diet guidelines. Experiments tested how adjacent surfaces such as hair and surroundings modified judgments of age, health, and attractiveness. Skin condition alone does not determine these ratings. Contrast effects play a measurable role. The results refine models of visual perception used in dermatology and cosmetics research. Phys.org coverage describes controlled tests showing that background and hair color shift observer ratings even when actual skin parameters remain fixed. These findings add a perceptual layer to assessments previously based solely on skin metrics. Machine learning analysis of Enterococcus cecorum examined not only gene content, but also the spatial arrangement of those genes. Pathogenic strains clustered differently from non-pathogenic ones. The method improves rapid identification of disease-causing isolates in poultry operations. The phys.org piece explains that genetic neighborhood patterns helped separate strains more reliably than gene lists alone. This spatial approach offers a new diagnostic layer for agricultural microbiology. Proposals bearing stronger AI writing signatures were 4 percentage points more likely to win NIH support. The same proposals showed reduced conceptual breadth. The study quantifies a trade-off between efficiency gains and originality in research planning. Phys.org reports that the pattern emerged from analysis of recent NIH submissions scored for AI assistance markers. The 4-point lift came with measurable contraction in the range of ideas presented. Argonne scientists developed a machine learning pipeline that processes diffraction patterns as soon as experiments finish. The system operates at the advanced photon source and shortens the interval between measurement and insight. It targets materials science workflows that previously required offline computation. The phys.org article describes Donut as enabling on-the-spot interpretation during beam time. This reduces the lag that once separated data collection from hypothesis refinement. Analysis of chart-topping tracks showed listeners use music for 7 distinct regulatory functions, including comfort, reflection, and processing grief. The study links lyrical content to measurable effects on mood and well-being. Results add quantitative support to music's role in daily emotional management. Phys.org coverage notes that the 35-year corpus supplied enough variety to map these 7 functions across genres and decades. The findings tie specific lyrical themes to documented psychological uses. The technique exploits decay timing rather than emission color to multiplex signals. It enables simultaneous tracking of several proteins without spectral overlap. Applications include gene expression studies and proteon interaction mapping in intact tissues. Phys.org explains that fluorescence lifetime imaging distinguishes proteins by how long their emitted light persists after excitation. This timing-based separation avoids the color channel limits of conventional multiplex imaging. A Lancet-linked study followed older individuals without elevated cardiovascular risk and found no increase in deaths after statin discontinuation. The data suggest deprescribing may be reasonable for this subgroup. Further trials are examining broader safety and quality of life outcomes. Stat News reports the study focused on adults over 75 classified as low risk by standard criteria. The absence of a mortality signal supports individualized decisions about continuing therapy. A temperature surge 304 million years ago coincided with rapid environmental shifts. Researchers compare the event to present-day dynamics to identify potential tipping point thresholds. The geologic record supplies a natural experiment for testing current models. Phys.org notes that the spike occurred within an otherwise cold interval and left clear stratigraphic markers. These markers allow direct comparison of rate and magnitude with modern warming trajectories. Next time, we will be watching for further details on how fluorescence lifetime imaging scales to field applications in plant genetics. That's Planetterrian Daily for today. If you enjoyed this, a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify really helps new listeners find the show. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NARA Network. Links in the show notes. This show comes to you from the NARA Network. If you want another sharp daily briefing, Unintended Consequences has you covered. True stories of good intentions that backfired. All our shows are free at naranetwork.com. The Do Positive Pod is the club for people who do something about it. Episodes and the dispatch wall at naranetwork.com, the DP Pod. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.